Before I begin this video, I have to give a huge shout out to a couple of people, because without them, it would have taken me forever to get this video done in the first place. A couple of months ago, I went to my social media asking for help with getting footage of the popular fan game AM2R. It wasn't that I couldn't record the game myself, but more that I lacked the free time to do so, and I was more than humbled by the amount of people who came out to help me get the media I needed. Be it from their previous Let's Plays, or even going out of their way to record completely new playthroughs just for me to use. So if you could do me a favor, please go and check out these guys and give them some support. Nowadays, it can be very hard to get some traction and make a name for yourself, so help a fellow Metroid fan out by giving them some love. I've put a link to all the sites and channels who helped me in the description for you to easily visit. And once again, to those who reached out to help, thank you for lending me a hand, and I hope I can do some collaboration with anyone out there in the future. With that said, let's get this video going, shall we? Fantastic work on Samus! Your valiant efforts have hopefully put a stop to the Space Pirates' plans for some time. Just imagine what horrors it would have achieved if it were left alone. However, we fear that they may try and collect more of those Metroid creatures to do a second assault at any moment. So, our finest science people came up with the best solution for this situation. Samus, we want you to go to planet SR388 and destroy all of the Metroids.
Are you sure that's a good idea?
Of course it is. We have the finest science in all of the galaxy. They know what's best. Nothing can possibly go wrong.
Yeah, but won't destroying an entire species cause problems with the planet's ecosystem or something like that? Shouldn't you do more testing before executing this plan?
We will pay you with a lifetime supply of bird seeds.
Why didn't you say so, silly goose? I'm your exterminator.
Well, this was a topic that has been a long time coming, if you may. Ever since I was making videos on Samus Returns a couple of years ago, many of you kept requesting me to make a video about a particular fan game that gained a lot of popularity. And the reason why I didn't touch that subject back then was because I wanted to give as much attention to the new game in this series as I could to hopefully attract new players and increase the overall popularity of the franchise. But now that we're back into another small Metroid hiatus, I think it's a good time as any to finally shed some light on this fan project, as a way for me to thank those people for their patience and giving me their support. Not that this game needed it or anything. But first, I have to be honest with you guys about something, and that is that I'm not really the biggest supporter when it comes to fan games. I don't mean this in the sense that I dislike them because they aren't official products, but I guess it's got more to do with the fact that I don't want to be disappointed when a specific project can't be completed, since making games is a tough job as it is, especially without any resources at hand. However, there was one exception to this rule. A then small project I discovered on my years in college going by the name of another Metroid 2 remake, commonly known as AM2R. I don't fully remember exactly how I stumbled upon this project at first. I think it was thanks to some game marathon event or so, but since then I was cautiously optimistic for this project's release. Fast forward to 2016 and Metroid would have an unceremonious 30th anniversary since Nintendo didn't have any events planned for it. But instead, fans would find a way to celebrate this occasion with the grand release of AM2R, the passion project of a talented Dr. M64 and his team that has spanned over several years. And while yes, the DMCA that came from Nintendo stung many fans back in the day, we should look at it with a positive light and be happy that this project was able to be completed and see a small release, unlike other Nintendo related fan projects that are cancelled mid-development. And you know, once it's on the internet, it stays there forever. And before any of you go ahead and say that the guys at the Big N took down the game because they wanted to make a quick copy of it for profit, let me remind you that a game like Samus Returns can take a team around 4 years or so to complete. And considering it came out a year later in 2017, it's safe to assume that the game was in development for some time before AM2R's eventual release and takedown notice. And lastly, I want to state that I won't be doing any comparisons between this game and Samus Returns. because these are my thoughts of AM2R in a vacuum from my experience playing it around the time Federation Force was released. Even then, I don't think it's fair doing a comparison because these two games ultimately offer completely different approaches and reimaginings to the same source material. If the title of the game wasn't obvious enough, AM2R is a fan reimagining of Metroid 2 Return of Samus, which at times can be considered to be the black sheep of the series for a few reasons. What this project set out to do was to give this title the zero mission treatment, by rebuilding it from the ground up with some new additions to give this otherwise overlooked title some more exposure, while at the same time offering a new experience for veterans along the way. And personally, I think it was the best choice the team could have gone with, since Super Metroid still holds up today once you get used to the controls, and with how much love that game gets, it would have been a bigger gamble in the long run by trying to live up to its legacy while also appeasing the fanbase in the process. So, where do I begin with sharing my thoughts of this project? Well, I guess I can start with the most important aspect of any game, and that is its controls. And can I just say that this is what really sets AM2R apart from other fan games. It handles so great that it feels just like Zero Mission, and is what astounded me the most and probably is my favorite aspect of this game since I could easily jump in with my muscle memory. Add to that the great visuals trying to simulate the art from the Game Boy Advance era, while using some new visual effects here and there to create special scenarios in the process, and alongside a great soundtrack that are remixes from previous games, and I couldn't blame you for mistaking this game with a first-party title. And it didn't stop there, because the team revamped the entire map of the original game from the ground up, giving each one of the areas its own unique image that gives them some sort of presence as a whole. And in this way, they told a story along the way. With the level design alone, there was enough to tell a narrative of sorts, but the team went one step ahead and gave us logbook entries like the ones in the Prime series, which is a nice touch of detail. Although I could probably go without some of the references they squeeze in them at times. These scan logs don't only apply to the locations you visit, but even the bosses you fight throughout the adventure. And man, are there many new battles in this game, from security drones, Torizo statues, and even a returning boss from Metroid Fusion. This was something that I feel wasn't needed for a remake, but it's definitely a worthy addition that helps add some extra surprises for veterans to keep them on their toes. I admire the team for staying as faithful as possible to the Game Boy title, but it's also nice that they still went ahead and gave us some new enemies and locations along the way to offer a whole new experience. There's just so much care put into this project, from how simple it is to boot up, the low specs required to run it, the fully customizable controllers, and the many quality of life improvements made from the original game so it's easier for players to enjoy. But like in all of my videos, I like to discuss the good things with the bad, and my intention with this as always is to provide some constructive criticism for things to improve in the future games that can hopefully help any upcoming developer. And I know that some of the problems I'm going to mention would have eventually been fixed if it weren't for the takedown notice, but I still gotta mention them though. And I'll start by going over my biggest issue, and it has to do with the boss fights, specifically those pertaining to the Metroids. Staying true to its source material, AM2R has you hunting down all of the Metroids on SR3D8. Sadly though, fighting these parasites is more annoying here than ever, mostly because their AI is set to bum rush mode like in the original game. So there isn't much depth to them, and on top of this, they also have a very precise hitboxes, which can be difficult to hit mid-combat. And sadly, they don't offer much in terms of new mechanics or gimmicks for their fights. I should also state that this comes with a few extra issues, one of them being the little invincibility frames you have after getting hit, which can make it very easy for you to be juggled, which is extremely annoying. And I feel like this artificially makes the game harder than necessary. It also doesn't help the fact that I feel some of these bosses also overstate their welcome at times, especially with how much damage they can take before they are defeated. Like, say, the Torizo statue was a nice throwback, but when it suddenly grows wings and starts attacking me like a boss from Ikaruga, then I start raising an eyebrow. I feel that the amount of new bosses is a bit too much, that it makes fighting the Metroids more like a chore as a result, considering that they aren't as fleshed out as these other new encounters. So maybe if the energy was spent into fleshing out the parasites, then it could have made for a smoother experience. Aside from this, another small nitpick I have is that although you get all of Samus's inventory at your disposal, including some power-ups that are not in the original game, AM2R sadly doesn't give you any brand new power-ups of sorts that can help it create a new twist on the 2D formula, which I think was a missed opportunity. Be it with something like implementing the boost ball, perhaps a new puzzle gimmick, or just making you combine different power-ups together to destroy specific targets, to help this project stand out more from the other Metroid-styled games out there. Then there is the exploration. Don't get me wrong, it's done extremely well, just like in the official games. But for how expansive this new map is, there sadly isn't any easy way for you to fast travel to previous areas. Sure, there are some hub locations with this feature installed here and there, but it would have been nice if all of them were in one central location late game instead of having them spread out between a couple of areas. And lastly, there is also the issue that some areas have more power-ups to collect compared to others, which I feel causes a bit of a disbalance in the sense of progression that can mess with the overall pacing and flow of the game at times, which is something I feel that the other titles in the same genre have been able to utilize to their fullest, so I'm rather surprised by this little misstep, if you may. And that pretty much sums up my thoughts on AM2R. It's definitely what I consider to be one of the ultimate love letters to the Metroid series. The amount of time Dr. M64 put into working on this project for almost 10 years is really something commendable, and I'm extremely happy to say that his efforts totally paid off. It's a case where I feel that the pros of the game totally outweigh the cons, even after all the criticism I just went over. And looking back, it was probably a huge risk of sorts to make this project an unofficial remake of Metroid 2, because then people will hold this game up to the same standards of the series. But it was a risk that completely paid off in the long run, and I think it's a part of the reason why it became a huge success with the fanbase. It felt like an official title when we didn't know what the future held for the franchise. This is definitely an experience that I feel any die-hard fan should try out, assuming they haven't done so at this point. But I probably wouldn't recommend it to newcomers, simply because of the somewhat harsh difficulty spikes that you can run into occasionally, and that they may also not truly appreciate all the details of this game without having any previous exposure to the series. If you are a newcomer to the franchise, I can recommend enough that you try out Metroid Fusion, Zero Mission, the first Prime game, or even Samus Returns as your first experience. And if you end up enjoying those games, then by all means, try out Super Metroid, the rest of the Prime trilogy, or even AM2R if you happen to find it. I don't know what the future may hold for Dr. M64, but I for one am certainly excited to see what project he can get himself involved with next, and I can only wish him but the best on his future endeavors. In the end, it's projects like this what makes me happy about the community. For how little love the Metroid series might get from the guys at Nintendo, you can always rely on the fanbase making all sorts of stuff to show their love and appreciation for this amazing franchise, which in a way will keep the flames of the series alive and well for years to come.